Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
We're deep into Oscar season here at Below the Line. This is the 9th of 12 episodes with panels of film industry professionals discussing the Oscar nominees in their category of expertise. Today, we're talking about film editing, and I've got returning guests. Christopher Angel, you're a triple threat writer, director, editor. You've been editing for over 25 years, and your credits include James Cameron's Expedition Bismarck and Gary Shandling's The Making of the Larry Sanders Show. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's so nice to be back. Thanks.
Amy Duddleston, you're a film editor with 30 years in the industry, and your credits include Mare of Easttown, Gus Van Sant's Psycho, and Love and Death. Glad you could make it again.
Oh, it's my favorite time of the year.
Well, it is my favorite time as well. Don't tell the guests on my other episodes. But this one's always a lot of fun. Listeners, if you want to learn more about Chris or Amy's credits, imdb.com is your resource. Search for Below the Line, find this episode, and there, with a click on their names, it'll take you right to their full Hollywood credit list. Okay, here we go. The 2023 nominees for film editing are Anatomy of a Fall, The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things. We're going to discuss them in that order, and spoilers are possible, so consider this a warning.
An embarrassment of riches is what it is.
It's a very interesting selection of movies. Really, yeah.
We got a lot of things to talk about with this.
Yeah.
One note that I will put out here at front, and again, I'm a bit of a broken record on this, but while recognizing our below-the-line compatriots by name, I do occasionally mispronounce some of them. Chris and Amy, you should correct me if you notice I get anything wrong. Otherwise, you're equally responsible, I'm sorry to say. So,
oh, no.
There are a few exciting names in the mix.
Yeah, there's some names that I should have probably Googled before this.
Yeah, well, let's get into it. All right, we're off to the races. Let's start with Anatomy of a Fall, editing by Laurent Seneschal.
Oui.
Absolument.
I loved this movie.
Me too. Amy, we always agree, Amy. Probably a problem.
I know, you've got to get yeah.
I'm waiting to see the other movies on this list if we disagree, but I'm with you. So keep going.
I loved this movie. I saw it in the theater and then I watched it again with, my in-laws at Christmas. And it just, I was like, there were so many things going on and it just like, and your brain just kept moving. And I just thought it was brilliant. I just really thought it was brilliantly edited. I mean, there was a part down towards the end where you're kind of like, I'm ready for this to be over, like wrap it up. But then like something would happen. And it was just really, I just thought it was stellar editing, stellar directing, like the writing, like everything about this film was like top notch. It was just best picture. I loved it.
As an aside on editing, I'm going to leave that big pause in there, Amy, and people just have to imagine you shaking your hands in the air when you were talking about that. So we're going for a much more natural approach to the editing, listeners. You probably noticed by now, but we're going to leave that in.
I do that.
So unfortunately for drama here, I totally agree with Amy. This was like, I'm actually sad this is the one we're starting with, because for me, this was sort of like the surprise of the year. I think of all the movies nominated in this category, it just stands out as being like the smallest. It's got to be the smallest budget. It's sort of less sets, less ambitious on like a production point of view. But for me, it makes the editing stand out all the more because it works. And the editing, like I can watch it and really see where the editing is making this movie better. And I think for somebody who's like trying to look at the editing category, that's an amazing place to be because it really speaks to like the technique of the editor. I'm going to spoil the movie a little bit, but there's two kind of parts to this movie, right? So there's a murder that takes place, and the question is it a murder? Is it a suicide? And the first half of the movie takes place in the chalet where the murder happened, and it's a father and a family, or the death. I'll call it the death. The death happens. So the first half all takes place in the chalet, and it has its own rhythm and pacing, and it's very interesting because it's the psychological kind of triangle. There's a lawyer who comes in, there's the mother, and there's the child. And then the second half of the movie takes place in the courtroom with that same lawyer, and it's a French style court case, but the rhythm and the pacing of the editing changes. But it is so, I think Amy was like gripping onto a cliff there, so on the edge of your seat.
I was gripping.
Yes, when she paused, that's what she was doing. But it's just like it's masterfully done, and the editing helps tell the story and keeps you so engaged. And it really was like for me, like the editing surprise of the year. So loved it.
Yeah, it was like you would go like after I saw it the first time, we went home and like talked about it for like 2 hours because well, what if this and what if this and but remember the thing they did, and it was it was just chock full of so much stuff, and you didn't even know it like when you were watching it, like you were just it was like this whole drama was unfolding, and then you'd go back in your head and you'd think about like all of these things that you saw, and I was like, that's editing. These are like things that you were like given, you were just absorbing them, and then you thought about them later. It was just a brilliant like experience. And also I was learning about the French courtroom was like the greatest thing ever.
It's very different than the
I
American
want Law and
courtroom.
Order. France.
Yes, that would be really interesting.
Like they're just like these lawyers going at it, like having a conversation, and you're just like, what is this? And like everybody would like opine, and you're just that was crazy. I loved that.
And the other thing the movie did that I thought was just amazing was like, this seems very French to me, but it allowed the characters to philosophize in a way that like, it's hard to find that in an American movie, but it felt natural. And I think within the context of a court case and a murder, like it just totally made sense, particularly like the way the lawyers interacted. But there's some really big ideas, and the characters, were going there and talking about them. And she was a writer, the main character. So again, she could talk in that way, but I feel like the editing really did them a lot of favors, helping it seem natural, despite the fact that there's some pretty like formulated ideas going on here. But I enjoyed that part.
Yeah.
The other thing I just want to point out is like one of my favorite editorial sequences of the year is in this movie, and it's a scene where the boy was sort of like having, I can't remember what the setup was now, but basically he's hearing like a tape of his dad, and the dialogue like sinks right over him. He's recounting what his dad said, and the dialogue sinks right over his lips from the father. And it's like a very simple technique, but the impact was like triply powerful, and it was just so well done.
Yeah.
So again, I'm looking at it in subtitles, so there's like an extra layer, but I know a little bit of French, and it was really interesting to try to hear it and see how well it, like as the editor sunk up the dad's dialogue over the son. Really, really interesting.
Yeah, it was really interesting to use as like memory.
Yeah.
And like who's like who it belongs to, and also just another part where they're having the argument, and like it's the tape of the argument, and you're hearing it, but you're watching it play out, and then it goes into the courtroom, and they're listening to this. It was so compelling. I still get chills when I think about that whole like thing. So 4 stars.
2 thumbs
10
up.
out of 10.
Yeah. Well done, team.
Now, Chris, when you mentioned about the style changing between the chalet and the courtroom, in practical terms, what do you mean? Like, what may I have not noticed, even though you were carrying me as a viewer on a certain journey? But, how was editing a part of that?
Yeah. So, I mean, so again, for some reason this year, I watched all these movies like before I knew what was going to be nominated for editing. So I didn't watch it quite as like detailed, like, oh, here's how they put this sequence together as I might have in past years. But my impression from it was that things were a little bit longer takes, a little slower paced in the first half in the chalet. And then once they got in the courtroom, by necessity, because it's, the lawyers are there, the client is there, the judge is there. It's just a more cutty section. It's more paced up, and it has that tension that would make you want to cut that way. So that was my impression and takeaway. I'd be curious to go back and see if I was correct, but that was my feeling of sort of longer takes versus a more intense pace.
I also saw the film sometime before the list of nominations came out, and my takeaway was that there's an intentional ambiguity around what's actually happened that you're left with. I'm curious if, as editors, you think that the editor and the director had an answer and was subtle about it, or is it intentionally edited to leave it ambiguous? And is that a part of the force of the film?
Oh, I feel like she left it ambiguous. It's like they let, like, it's on purpose. It's like you know,
Yeah, I'd be shocked if that wasn't in the screenplay
Yeah,
that way. It felt like it was done very, very on purpose to
like I
me.
have friends who gone on about like the kid and what he did and like how he like it's really just so many. It's so ambiguous. Everybody has a theory of truly like, well, I think it how
I mean, to me, it's the point of one of the points of the movie, right? It's one of the themes that Amy mentioned earlier, which is like, what is knowable? Like, what does it mean to know the truth, or what is truth? And the movie like leaves you debating, like, I don't know the truth, and I think that's a part of this legal case, and it's part of like the human condition. So to me, it was like because it was one of the themes, it had to end that way, or was done on purpose anyway.
All right, we'll move on to the second film on our list, The Holdovers, film editing Kevin Tent.
well, I did not love this movie. Um, and maybe part of it was because I felt it was too long. And maybe that is because of the editing.
I'm glad to
um,
disagree finally a little bit,
okay,
but
well, no,
yeah,
and I mean,
that's good.
I thought like this is a really well done film. It's Alexander Payne. It's just like everything is just it's really well done. There's nothing. It was funny. I watched it with my in-laws who were also like boarding school students in the 60s in Massachusetts. So they had like their own opinions. And so just like this it was like my mother-in-law could say, right, that's that's Deerfield, that's this, that's she was naming all the schools. So it may have but no, I just felt like I really could appreciate like what he was trying to do, like the whole vibe he created of just like being in this school. And I really like some of the characters were excellent. Like the kid is great, Divine Joy Randolph is awesome, like and just Paul Giamatti playing off of everyone. It's excellent. He's great. I just felt like some parts just dragged out way too long for what this movie really is. And so while I cannot argue that it's very well done, I just really felt it was too long. There were parts where I was just like, why are we here? Why we need to move on. And yeah, so as much as I love Kevin Tent, Uncle Kevin, um, I yeah.
Huh. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, first of all, like I went to a private boys' school that had boarding in Toronto, so like I really did relate to that part of it and enjoyed that world, and it had this great 70s feel. Um, it's interesting. I actually this question of like runtime and like what drags and what doesn't. I actually went right before this podcast. I went and looked up the runtimes of all the movies that were nominated because I was really curious, like what my perception was versus the reality. Funnily enough, I get like it was a slow moving movie and sort of a 70s style, but this was the shortest movie of all the ones nominated. It was two
Yes.
hours and 13 minutes. So that's interesting right there. Like we can talk more about that with some of the longer ones, I guess. But so I was okay with the pace. I mean, I don't have a lot to say about the editing, frankly. Like I think Kevin Tent did like a great job. Like he let the actors act. I tried to look back at it. It's like it's really well cut. Like I would like to be able to edit as well as he did, but it's not like the editing is foregrounded at all.
No,
Like
it's a
it's
drama
just in the background making, yeah, it's a
with
drama, it's
comedy. Yeah.
coverage, it's acting. I mean, he helped the actors' performances clearly. Like this new
Oh yeah.
kid who hasn't really acted in a movie before is amazing. So clearly he's doing a good job, but it's not like showy editing. It's not a thing that like I'm gonna sit back and remember and like, oh, that's the best editing of the year. It's very, very, very well done. And that's about all I can say.
No, he was a very curious nomination. I mean, he was not on my list of nominees when I was nominating, and I mean, and it's not because I didn't like this film. It's like I could appreciate like everything he did to help this movie along, and um, but I just yeah, it was kind of a weird choice to choose this movie, but people really love it, and I get that, but my kid who is now a cinema student in college is just like if they wanted to make a 70s movie, this movie should have been 98 minutes long. And
Probably true. Yeah,
I'm like, you learned that from your mother.
that's good. Yeah, the other thing I will point out that was well done in this movie was like use of music, like the Christmas music, the like television shows, like
He's really great
yeah,
with that, Alexander Payne. It's truly like the guy can create a vibe like no matter where he is. It's like if you're in wine country, if you're in Nebraska, like it's always just he is a fine filmmaker.
And Kevin Ten, editor, like helped make that, come alive. And
Yeah, all of those things. Yeah.
that was good. It was good. Very well done.
This idea of structuring it like a 70s movie, like the opening and closing credits, and a certain style that was visually being done. As the editor, is there something you would do different as an approach if you were trying to, I don't know, recreate that film style? Again, I hadn't noticed anything that I would point out on editing, but I'm curious if given the assignment, how you would be thinking about it differently as an editor.
I think for me, like there were story beats that really just felt unnecessary. Like the other kids that were, the holdovers that like move on fairly quickly. We lingered with them at the beginning and we were setting up something that was never like really going to pay off, except for like one of or two of the kids at the end. But like a couple of the other ones, I was just like, why are we, spending time with these kids when we need to get the ball rolling here? But I think, yeah, just like the long shots, the panning stuff. I mean, all of that stuff is very of a time, and that was, that was cool and effective. But I think just in story wise, there would have been things that I would have like really thought, let's move along. We don't need to be with these people.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think if a director came to me and I was editing and said, like, I want to make this feel like a 70s movie, I would do exactly what Amy's sort of critiquing, unfortunately. Like things moved slower back then, right? There were less edits per movie. I would try to look for longer takes. I try to look for like what I call mise en scène, which is like blocking the actors through space and letting them come into close-ups. And so, but it's a slower paced thing. And that's just not the way we make movies these days, right? Where we've gotten more propulsive and more used to like cutty stuff. So,
it was a little confusing too, because it's like a lot of this was playing for comedy. And so it's like really, and maybe, yeah, we should give Kevin a little more credit, but like I should anyway, that yes, it maybe of its time, but I just felt like then like just get rid of the stuff that you don't really need, because I do like those long shots and like the long, it wasn't super cutty. It played differently as a comedy than what we really think of as comedy, or like American Fiction, where it was kind of like, faster paced drama comedy. But anyway.
Well, we're not getting any shorter with these other films,
no,
as Chris
not.
pointed out. And that'll take us to our third
definitely
film.
Not.
Killers of the Flower Moon, film editing by Thelma Schoonmaker.
Why don't you go first, Chris?
oh man. Well, let me start with what I do like about the movie. Which will tell you something about what I'm going to say in a second. But I really love the use of the wide landscape shots and like the way then the cutting would jump into closer shots. And like that often was very propulsive, shocking and interesting. And like a sequence that stands out is like the fire sequence. I think it's a pretty famous sequence, but it's these sort of surreal shots of fire kind of bending the image, and the people are silhouetted against it, and it's intercut with like what's going on the personal sides. It's beautiful and very interesting. I mean, I just, it's hard for me, like, who am I to tell Martin Scorsese and Thelma Schoonmaker like what to do? Like, I'm not them, but yet I guess because we're in a podcast, I'm gonna tell them what to do. And on this theme, like, why is this movie so long? It's 3 hours and 26 minutes. Like, if you want to make a mini series, go make a mini series. But I just, like, as an editor, I was just like, I'm getting the same information over and over again. So I really didn't enjoy watching the movie. It's hard to watch, right? There's a lot of violence, but it was the editor in me. I wanted to get up and start cutting stuff.
Yeah.
And again, it's just like, it's hard for me to say that because Martin Scorsese is like one of my heroes, and there's nobody like in the history of cinema, like there's few editors that I respect more, but I just wish somebody had spoken up earlier and said, try this 30 minutes shorter and see what you get. I don't know if they did, but I really would suggest that. And I think it would have made a better movie.
No, I just felt like Marty and Thelma, they're at like this point in their lives and careers where they can just do whatever the fuck they want to do. And I just felt like we were kind of like that was our torture. But because like this story is like it's like a very unsettling story. It's an important story. Like it's well told. Everything about it, but why it just dragged on, and it ruined it for me.
Me
Like
too.
it ruined it. And
I
that
agree.
made me really sad because it is an important story to be told. Like these stories of like Native Americans and how they've been eternally screwed over in America.
And I mean, the funny thing is, like, I'll point out, like, we're in the minority. I was curious, Amy, what you were going to say, because we do
Yeah.
tend to agree, and but which has been fun, sort of listening to you over the years and kind of like understanding, I think, where we're coming from as editors. But I had to go back and I read the like New York Times review of it because I was like, okay, why I'm out of step with like the mainstream on this on some level. And they certainly were getting a lot out of it. Like they loved it. They thought it was like elegiac and like this epic Western, but I just feel like it would have been stronger had it been tighter.
I feel the same.
Start later. And Leonardo DiCaprio's character, I got told over and over again, like he's not the smartest guy, but he's like being manipulated by Robert De Niro. Like I got it. Like wow, there's like
you
so
don't
many
have to show us like every character in the movie pointing this out.
Yeah.
Like that.
Like have some confidence in what you got. Like I just feel less is more. Like I could have.
Oh.
I don't know. It's also hard. Like again, we've said this in past years, but like I have an emotional reaction to these movies, and that really does influence or color my impression of the editing, right? So then I start to try to like rationalize and figure out what it is about the editing that's aligning with my emotional reaction. And I really wanted to like know more about the female lead. I mean, she was amazing. She's nominated in her category. But I just like the characters seemed underdeveloped compared to the other characters, which was really unfortunate because every time she was on screen, I'm like, oh, like what is going on? Like what
You wanted to be with her like so much.
Yeah.
Like all of those women, and just like that whole story was so good. I feel like it was a missed opportunity.
Yeah, totally. And then the other part of it that was a little hard was like, the original book, which I've not read, but it, dealt more with the FBI. Well, they come in like kind of very late, and there's like a whole other movie suddenly happening. It's like, okay, we've got the FBI investigating what's going on. It's like, oh, that's a separate movie, but we're going to start it here. It's like end of act two. I don't know. It was a lot.
It was a lot.
They don't have enough time for their movie because they, in 3.5 hours, they still have to have a scene where they all come together and explain what's going on. Like you still get all this exposition right in the right, where they all come together on a hill.
But God forbid there's an intermission.
Right. And the beginning is also like exposition central. It's like
so much story.
Oh my gosh.
Like, I'm like,
yeah. Yeah. I'm like, okay, I'm taking notes. I got to remember this for like the end.
My kid really liked it. She's like, I was paying attention the whole time, and I was like, well, good for you, honey. But I was drifting off, and
me too.
Made me sad. But
too bad.
Yeah.
This is an interesting one. I wonder what is about the litmus test on it, because we've been talking about it a lot through the various categories, and it's not just a focus on the craft, because again, production design is amazing and costume design is amazing.
Yeah.
But folks from that perspective are often also very impressed with the movie. And there's a strong, either you kind of got on whatever ride this was and went with it, or it felt off and it stayed off. It stayed off for me as well. I've gone on record as saying so. I'm with you guys on this one.
It's like Chris said, it's like Scorsese is somebody that like we revere, and like Film Shoemaker, Raging Bull is one of the reasons I'm an editor. It's the thing that like woke me up to there's something else going on besides Robert De Niro punching people. What is this thing? Yes. It was like I was 15 and I was like, there was something, I owe my career to these people.
And the same for me with Goodfellas. Like that was the movie at film school I watched over and over again. People in film school know, like I did like an homage to it. I made one because I was like, so like this is amazing. I cannot believe what's going on here.
Such a great film.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I feel like we bring these things when we come, we think, okay, it's going to be brilliant. It's going to be, we're waiting for Goodfellas again, we're waiting for that thing. And, we just get disappointed. And it's sad to be disappointed in your heroes. And it's hard.
You have all of Apple's money. You have all of this incredible
Yeah.
talent around a director who can really do whatever he wants. And
Whatever he wants.
you hope for something shorter at the very least.
That would help. Yeah.
That's
Is it too much to ask for?
just a little shorter.
All right. Fourth film on our list is Oppenheimer, film editing by Jennifer Lame.
Jennifer Lame.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I really liked this movie. I thought it was very well done. It was long, and I did feel it, but I will say Robert Oppenheimer was a person who wanted to have it all the ways. And it was like this movie showed all of that. And I just felt like this story was very well told, and it was very well done. And it even, like, the whole thing with Robert Downey Jr., like, who wanted to have it his way, like all of that on top of that, it was a very satisfying experience. I just remember leaving the theater going, that was very good. Not sure, like, I didn't love it, but I was very satisfied when I left. And I just felt like it was a whole experience, and the whole experience was worth, like, my time sitting in the theater. And I thought Jennifer Lame did a tremendous job, because there was a lot of back and forth and a lot of side stuff. And I was never lost in all of those 3 hours and whatever it was.
It was exactly 3 hours long. I had to look it up. Totally agree with you, Amy. Again, sorry, podcast listeners. I really enjoyed the movie. I thought Jennifer Lame did an amazing job. And again, it's funny, like Anatomy of a Fall, like there's two worlds, right? It's not really a courtroom. I guess it's Congress, but it feels like a courtroom. And there's like an investigation that goes on behind the scenes. And then there's the actual building of the bomb, the atomic bomb, right?
Yeah.
So there's like sort of two movies, but she really balanced them.
Threaded this needle.
Yeah.
That
So
sewed through the whole thing.
It's really impressive, because again, I didn't get lost, but it built on itself. And I really, really appreciated that. And that felt like a lot of the editing made that work really, really smoothly.
Yeah. She's my bet to win this whole thing.
Me too.
I mean,
if I was going to pick one externally, that would be it. If it was me voting, I would probably vote for Anatomy of a Fall, just because it was such a surprise. But this is the one I actually think will win the category. Yeah. So I agree with you there. There's a sequence too I want to point out that just is my other favorite editing sequence of the year. It's I mean, the movie's been criticized a little bit because it doesn't show the effects of the bomb on the Japanese civilians who were sadly attacked by this bomb. But there's a sequence that I found really fascinating. I thought kind of got at it a little bit. Oppenheimer's like giving a kind of a victory speech after they've had a successful test. And he starts to imagine that his audience and his audience are the other scientists and the people who helped him make the bomb. He starts to imagine that they are victims of the bomb itself, an atomic bomb attack. And it was very harrowing, but it was also so well edited, because you're kind of like going in and out of like reality, which is the speech, and then his visions and the effect on him. And to me, like that, it was just such a great psychological profile. Somebody's like, what have I unleashed? Right. But it was all done through editing.
Yeah.
And so I loved that sequence. And I thought it actually got at this question people critiqued the movie about. Like they show this character understanding, like this is going to cause a whole new level of human suffering. Like we've created something really dangerous here. We've opened the box. So I thought that was a fantastic sequence and kind of symbolic of the editing power of the whole movie.
Yeah. And just how they, like, science and how excited they were about like getting so thrilled about, like, can we split these many atoms, and can we, how many, things do we throw in the thing? Like all of those things building up to the first test, and all of that stuff was really, it was just very well done. But like that sequence is really amazing. I hadn't thought of that in a while.
it's not a perfect movie, but it's like it
No,
drags in some spots and stuff a little bit long. And the women
no, and
characters are
like
a
the whole
little
scene
bit,
with like
yeah,
Emily Blunt, like,
yeah.
you
It's
know,
the
it got
women
a little
characters are
tiresome.
underbaked,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
truly underbaked.
But
And
overall, like I do think it's the one I would probably I think the Academy's gonna pick for this category. That's my guess.
it was a lot of storytelling.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really impressive.
yeah.
And just an interesting story, like, no matter.
Truly, like
Yeah.
I really felt like I learned about this guy and just like what
Mhm.
was going on in that time period. And, Robert Downey Jr., like, I, he was so good. I loved him
Yeah.
so much in this movie. I was dying. He was so good. At first, I didn't even recognize him. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. But he's
Because
so
he's like become
believable.
Iron Man
Yeah,
for
he's
so
right.
long, and you're just like, ugh, and then you're just like, he's so believable
Yeah. Yeah, he
and
really
such a
inhabits that
cad and like
character.
horrible. And you're
Yeah.
just like, oh,
He's not
so
afraid to
great.
go there. It's great. Yeah.
Now, it has come up in discussion. I hadn't read directly, but it was mentioned before that the movie is intended to be Oppenheimer's point of view. In the sense, somebody said that the script itself was written in first person rather than sort of descriptive of the scenes. Rather, I walked into the room or this sort of approach. Is there anything about the editing that you think reflects this assignment as well?
Well, I think like that whole sequence that Chris pointed out, I mean, that's definitely his point of view. And just like so much of it is, but like the fact that it does go off on other characters and like you're seeing kind of like machinations of like what's going on with Robert Downey Jr. and um was that his point of view? I don't know. I never really considered that, but interesting. You know, maybe the women characters.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah. If you go off with another character, it's like, right, whose point of view is that?
Yeah.
Also, use of color in black and white. I mean, it's not really an editing thing because like that obviously has to be well, obviously it doesn't have to be decided, but it seemed like to me it was probably decided in shooting. We could try to go like make something black and white later, but that seemed to be not what they were doing because obviously the black and white was very carefully shot and very beautiful. But there's something there, I guess, between like was one of them more objective and the other one more subjective, color in black and white. Like I've seen people try to describe it that way, maybe. But I don't know if I remember like an editorial difference between the black and white sections and the color sections. Didn't stand out to me that there was one.
And let me ask you guys about editing a film that is shot in an IMAX format, but obviously going to be released not only in IMAX, but more regularly sized screens as well. As an editor, how do you compensate for all that at the same time? Or what kind of challenge does that add?
It's hard.
It's really hard because you have to just like be very aware of like what your frame is and like what's in that frame and that would be really hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I've done it. Like Expedition Bismarck, actually, that's kind of what we did. It was shot to be IMAX or really wide, big screen, but we're cutting digitally, right? So we're cutting on computers. But what you just have to do is like again, sort of imagine this big and then screen the acts as you go in the biggest room you can find in your editing facility. But it does change your editing a little bit. I mean, somebody has to decide like, okay, are most people going to see this on IMAX or most people going to see this, streaming? And you kind of have to like go a little bit one way or the other and let the other one be compromised a little bit.
Yeah.
I feel like this cut actually to like be evergreen. Like I don't think I saw it on an IMAX screen, but I saw it
I
on a big
saw it in
screen.
IMAX and it was
Yeah,
really fun, but I mean,
yeah. There's a lot of internal charactery stuff that,
yeah, it,
yeah,
it wasn't like a super IMAXy movie. That was what was so
yeah,
funny. I mean, it's just like
yeah.
we're about to talk about Poor Things, which I wish I'd seen in IMAX, but like
Me too. Yeah,
they'd only shot that in IMAX.
seriously.
That'll take us right to it. As previewed, the last film on our list is Poor Things, film editing by Yorgos Mavropsaridis. I've probably made a mess of that name too.
I'm not gonna.
Mavropsaridis.
I wasn't gonna try to correct anybody on this because
He's a lovely,
Thanks for hopping
lovely
in with
man.
me on that, Amy. Thanks for hopping in.
Well, I really liked this movie. I'm a huge fan of Yorgos Lanthimos films in general, but I was just kind of taken on the Bella Baxter train, and I really enjoyed it. I did feel like it was too long. There was parts where I was like, okay, we need to be out of this section, and I'm ready to, move on. But I enjoyed it, and it was beautiful. It was a feast for the eyes. It was just all of that stuff in the background, and how much of it was green screened, and how much of it was projected, and how much of it was just crazy. And that was really fun. And I just enjoyed this movie. I mean, I loved it. But in terms of editing, she had chapters of her adventure. And so I just felt like some chapters were too long, and some of the parts, it was well done, but I felt like things could have been a little brief in spots.
Yes. Yet again, I totally agree with you, Amy. I found this movie really interesting, very impressive, amazing, beautiful, original, obviously, right? This filmmaker,
Super original.
he just has such an original voice, always does. The problem I have with the editing specifically is that, unfortunately for the editor, and maybe on purpose, but it's the editing as a craft in this movie is overshadowed by everything else, from the script, the acting, the
Cinematography.
production design, the costumes, the cinematography, right? Like everything else is just like different and amazing. And at the end of the day, I felt like the editing like didn't add much, like it wasn't special. And maybe again, it needed to be like to make the whole thing work, right? And there's a really like odd and interesting tone to this movie, and I think maybe if you tried to do too much with it, the movie would fall apart.
It might have fallen apart,
yeah,
because it's like you are following the adventures of Bella Baxter, and you couldn't make it quirky.
Seeing the world,
you had, and you're seeing it through her eyes, and it was a very specific thing, So yeah, it couldn't be flashy, but yes, it got upstaged by like practically everything else.
Yeah, like the cinematography,
like Mark Ruffalo,
right? Mark everything. Yeah, kind of like by design, I guess. Like it had to, right, just to keep it unified. But it's too bad in a sense. Like I kind of like. Yeah. I would like to see like, boy, if you press everything else to its extreme, like what would that mean for editing? And maybe again, it just wouldn't work. I don't know, but it was it was well done. And it let all the other things shine. So that's great. Like, but yeah, maybe not, again, not my top choice of all the editing films here for that reason.
Yeah. But I did like it.
Yeah, me too. Very interesting movie.
I liked it as well. And it is interesting to imagine like what would have been more in editing. Like if given the same free leash, or it's a good question. But I mean, as you guys have got me thinking about it when I hadn't before.
Like the favorite, he was nominated for that too. Yorgos Mavropoulos. Anyway, and that wasn't like a giantly spectacularly edited film. That was a lot of performance and a lot of like the same thing. It was like cinematography, and so I don't know. It's like a very subtle thing with him. And like, it's very interesting.
Yeah, to me, it gets back to the conversation we had before about like subjectivity and objectivity.
Yeah.
Like I would say like the editing probably errs a little bit here on like trying to be objective, because you got such an extreme character in Bella. I mean, she's a creation of a scientist. And so it's like, she's learning about life. But I feel like the way I would try is like, can you be more subjective? Like, what is it like to see things through her eyes editorially? What does that mean for some of these scenes? But a lot of it's baked in. I mean, it would be really hard. Like some of those like fisheye lenses and extreme widescreen, like it's really hard to work with that stuff because it's going to jump out. And he did an amazing job of making it all feel unified.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself is a big task. And maybe you can't push too much beyond that, or else you're going to kind of get lost. Like you won't be grounded with the character anymore.
Yeah.
But that was what I would suggest. It's like, is there a way to edit this more subjectively from her point of view? And what does that mean?
What does that mean
in these scenes? Yeah.
And maybe they tried it, and maybe it didn't work.
Be curious.
I don't know.
Let me know. Call us and let us know.
Tell us your other Yorgos.
Either Yorgos. We'll have a conversation with either one of you.
I would love to talk to either of them.
Can we talk about movies we thought should have been nominated?
One of my favorite sections every year. You guys always bring in interesting things. not nominated,
Oh,
2023, but noteworthy for film editing? Who wants to go first?
Wow, there's a lot here.
All of Us Strangers.
That was going to be my pick as well. Like 2 years in a row, Paul Mescal movies. Because if you remember last year,
All of Us Strangers was such a beautiful movie that was like fully ignored
and so well edited.
and
Oh
so
my
well
gosh.
edited. Jonathan Alberts.
Yeah, how did that not get
Like,
nominated?
how did it just like nobody like paid attention to it. It just got buried in all of the hubbub of whatever. And
Yeah.
it was just such an amazing film. And I do hope that in the future people check it out. All of Us Strangers, it was so beautifully edited. And it just moved me. Like I cannot stop thinking about this movie. Like when I saw it, like I could not stop thinking about it. And then I can just like conjure up moments of it, and you know, you'll like be shopping at a store and you'll hear that Pet Shop Boys song and you are just taken to that place and you're just like, oh my God, you know. It's so emotional, it's so beautiful. I really wish it had been nominated for best editing.
Me too. I had to actually look up, like, stop and see, like, what year is it eligible? Because I was like, why is it not nominated? I actually was totally confused for a little bit.
Yeah.
Because editing makes that movie work. Like, it's so integral to that story, and it does work. And it's a supernatural thriller, and it's a love story.
Yeah.
And it's just, it is subjectively done through editing. Like, it is a master
like
class.
reflections and like just such like it's an incredible film and just so well done. And I also felt like Past Lives was also really well done. I loved that movie, and just on an emotional basis, and like the economy of storytelling that they had, you know, was a very low budget film, and I just felt like it was just really beautifully done. Those were like my two things that I was kind of like, and maybe and like I don't know, American Fiction was really fun. Like all of Us Strangers is my number one.
And me too. And I was surprised that Maestro wasn't nominated in the editing category as well. Not my favorite movie of the year, but like
I did not like that movie, but
the music sequences are very, very good.
Yeah, they're very good.
Really well edited.
Like they're very good.
Yeah. I mean, the movie itself is like a little bit too long, a little bit episodic, but those music sequences are just beautifully done and very moving to me. So again, I was surprised that wasn't nominated over the Holdovers, but
yeah,
boy, I wish that All of Us Strangers got nominated for editing. I really do.
I'm glad you feel the same.
Yeah.
way.
2 years in a row that little Paul Mescal movies have, for me, been the one that has not nominated for editing. So Paul Mescal, I've got a script for you. Come call me. We'll work together. I'm on your side here.
Paul Mescal movies that are very sad, that are both really,
they are
really
sad
good,
Paul Mescal
tear
movies.
worthy. I mean, that would be the problem. Did you
see All of Us Strangers?
I did see it, and I just think people were so sad they didn't vote for it, and it's really, it leaves you like, even
it was too sad.
We even think, and we're not, since we didn't announce it up front, we're not going to do spoilers on it, but I can see editing is what makes it work, and it's just such a rug pull, the whole thing, that you just are left sad. There's no other way that's editing effective. Sad.
But Killers of the Flower Moon is also just so dark and sad. Like,
so dark and sad. And then, but you didn't leave like you just felt like really unsettled. Like,
yeah, it was a different feeling.
Like,
yeah, and then it leaves you on a radio show thing from the middle that doesn't really seem to fit with anything at all. And so I'm left less sad and more just confused by the end of.
True, that's a good point.
It's just like, it doesn't, the way it summarizes is not as, again, to the point, Strangers is just focused in a way that by the time you get to the end and everything is sort of played out, you're like, wow, what am I going to do with this? That's, to its credit.
True.
I recommend it for editing as well. Well, on that note, we'll call it a wrap. Great having you guys here, as always.
Thank you for having us. It's so much fun to get to have these conversations. And thank you, listeners, for listening in. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Chris and Skid, and everybody for listening. And I love talking about these movies every year. It's always a good time.
I appreciate you guys thanking the listeners as well. That is my next bit. Listeners, we appreciate your feedback. You'll find my contact info on our website, below the line oneword.biz. That's BIZ. Are you enjoying the Oscar episodes? We're enjoying the Oscar episodes. Join us again, and please subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Closing credits, thanks to Curtis Five for our music and John Wan for our logo. The logo is available on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers at redbubble.com. Let's see your mugs, guys. You guys are owners of the mugs. They're out there, folks. They're great. To all of our listeners, I do appreciate you, whether or not you buy a mug. Do rate us wherever you are, however, and tell your friends. Thanks again from Below the Line.